Welcome to Podcasting on a Plane. It's a view of aviation from both sides of the mic. I couldn't pick one, so why should you? Anyway, while you're here, you don't have to. On this show, we get all up in aviation from as many angles as possible, and we make a few bad jokes while we're at it. If you're new to the show, welcome. My name is Brandon Gonzalez. I'm an air traffic tower controller at a busy general aviation airport, but I have a 25-year background in aviation as a pilot, as a flight instructor, as an aircraft salesman, as a ramper for two major airlines, an FBO line serviceman, and I'm even a plane crash survivor, and now an aviation podcaster, where my goal is to serve the aviation community at large and to help you in your aviation endeavors, whatever they might be. And on weekends, I put on my CFI hat and I specialize in helping pilots operate more efficiently in busy, controlled airspace. And if that's something that interests you, well, send me an email or DM me on social media and we can maybe set something up. Today's episode starts with me not flying. Yeah, I know, bummer, right? Well, I had to go to Phoenix, which, believe me, is the perfect place to fly for a short trip from San Diego. But first off, the weather was a little sketchy on one of the days, and it was actually the kind of trip where having my car with me would be pretty nice. So I drove, and I actually like to drive between here and Phoenix. I mean, it goes fast, and I was able to catch up on a bunch of my favorite aviation podcasts. And if you're wondering, it takes about 1.5 APGs to get there. Anyway, the trip was to go watch my sister graduate from Arizona State University. So before we go any further, a huge public congratulations to Nikki. Well done. So my job was to be the photographer. And I like photography, and I have a good camera, but I'm not really a pro. I lucked out, though, because the pictures were 90% great, and that bought me part 2 of the job, which was to produce a little video and a photo album, which I was proud to do. And it came out pretty well, I must say, but I'll tell you what, editing is hard, okay? And this isn't my first go at video or anything, but I felt like it at one point, and I felt like I'd be an amateur forever. But there are some people who do this full time, and their level of skill is off the charts, and massive respect for them. And I had one of those sort of glass crashing moments like, oh, that's what it feels like to be working in a pro environment when you're not a pro. Not at all. And it reminded me a little bit of aviation. There are those who are pro and those who aren't. So let's take a quick trip down memory lane. As aviation goes, well, I've always been pro, one way or another. Since the beginning, I mean years even before lesson 1, I was already fully fixed on an airline future. In college, and then as a CFI, and in my brief airline tenure, and then into the FAA, there wasn't a single day where aviation wasn't my profession somehow. I mean, sure, I did, and I still do fly for pleasure, but everything was always seen through pro goggles. I couldn't see how anybody could have aviation as just a hobby. Like, that didn't exist for me. And confession time, I probably didn't give those types of individuals for whom it wasn't the same level of respect and regard that I did for the pro track people, which is my mistake. I was young, I was overly focused on a singular goal, and that made it really hard to see that there were just so many ways to enjoy aviation that had nothing at all to do with professional flying. But as the school of life gave me a few lessons, my attitude changed 180 degrees. And literally, I got to the point where I couldn't see how you could enjoy aviation in a professional setting. Like, that was the fastest way to ruin the fun. Well, a few more life lessons later, that changed too. And now that's what I specialize in. And I want to help people enjoy aviation in as many ways as possible. And after almost 25 years, I still haven't exhausted the list of ways to do that. Well, I've always one way or another been fascinated with the relationship between the pro and the non-pro side of things, if you can't tell. And, of course, that's why I specialize in it now. When I'm not at the tower, of course. Like, specifically, I like to help the non-pro who buys a high-performance single or single-engine turboprop get a bit of a professional edge on their skills and how to operate it in the national airspace system with confidence. And you wonder why I'm such an outspoken fan of Dick Collins. But you know what's funny, though? I sat down to make this episode, and as you might imagine, I had a list of all the things I wanted to share that could make you more pro-like in your flying. I settled on about 7 of them. The top 7 ways to be more pro, if you will. But as I worked, I realized something. Almost all of them centered around the same thing. Any guesses what that is? It's pre-flight planning. And no, I'm not talking about those horrifyingly long, tedious navlog making solo things your CFI made you fill out that you still probably cringe when you think about. I'm talking about how a true revenue flight in the pro world gets planned, or should I say, dispatched. Because that's one of the most major differences between the pro and the non-pro world. All of that planning that goes into letting an airliner go from point A to point B just isn't done in a lot of the general aviation world. Don't tell anyone. But it could be, and easily, and probably better than you filling out that nav log that I'm sure you make before each flight. I'm sorry, I couldn't get through that without laughing. I know you haven't done one of those since training, but don't worry. I'm not about to do a lecture on 91-103. You remember what that says, right? But what I am going to do is I'm going to educate you on some of the ways you can whip out a fully dispatched flight, crafted through the eyes of a pro airline dispatcher, and do it all in about 5 minutes. Just like the pros. Well, actually, I'm not going to do it. This guy is. That's right, the man, the myth, the legend. He's here to add that Acme Pro Edge to your Part 91 trip. As if you didn't know, Mike's a dispatcher for a major U.S. legacy air carrier. He's an aircraft owner, he's a father, and he's also the founder of the Flying in Life podcast. So maybe we'll get to those couple of other ways to be more pro another time. But until then, don't miss this amazing conversation I had with dispatcher Mike Karrells. All right, dispatcher Mike, we finally did it. We finally managed to meet up. I'm not going to tell everybody what time it is for you, but I appreciate you being here, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's no problem. I just got off of work, and it's life of a dispatcher, life of a shift work employee in aviation. Sometimes you get off of work and you sit down and have a beer and you talk with your friends, and it's 5 a.m, or it's 12:23 in the morning, or it's 5 p.m. It doesn't matter what time it is. We all just get off of work and we come home and we want to unwind after our shift, and so it's no problem what time it is.
Well, what better way to do that than record it and put it out for thousands of people here, right?
Exactly. I mean, we're just sitting down here with our few thousand close friends.
That's right. Well, cool. All right. Well, we're obviously here with dispatcher Mike today, dispatcher Mike Karrells, and he works for Acme Airlines as a dispatcher extraordinaire, which is a pretty interesting career path. So, Mike, why don't you actually take us a little bit through how this whole aviation thing started for you?
So aviation started with me because I liked airplanes, and my grandfather was he was a radioman in the Navy during World War II, and he saw that I liked airplanes, and he liked airplanes, so we would always go to, he lived in Milwaukee, we'd go to the parking lot at Mitchell Field. It's still there up on the north end of the runway. And I don't remember exactly seeing planes or what we saw, but just kind of like timeline and history and stuff. Northwest used to fly some big heavy metal in and out of Milwaukee in that time. So I saw DC-10s and some really big fun airplanes in and out of Milwaukee. And so it started there, and then the passion and love of airplanes continued on. I remember we went on an airplane trip. I think I was in 5th grade. And I was getting taken out of school early, and I was so excited to go flying on an airplane. And I guess I was talked about it the whole day, because my teacher told my parents, goes, "I'm glad you guys are taking him, because he can't stop talking about flying on an airplane." And we were going out to Denver for a family trip, and I was excited to go flying. It's what apparently I had the passion in me from birth. So I went from there, and then coming time in high school, it's like, all right, what are you going to do with your life? And I kind of put 2 and 2 together, like, holy cow, I could be a pilot. I'm like, I'm going to go to school and be a pilot. And then went through and did the university searches, and ended up going to Lewis University, which was I told my parents, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to Lewis. It's too close to home. I want to go away. Like, I even went out and looked up at UND up in Grand Forks, and great campus, great school. 16 hours away from home just wasn't appealing, and something about North Dakota winters. So I chose to go to the local school, Lewis, just outside of Chicago. They have an airport right on the field, so many times you could be bed to airplane in 20 to 30 minutes, because it was a 6-minute walk to the airport, and where you got the dispatch, you got the airplane folder, and went out there. So that was August of 2001. I started my freshman year in college. Got a couple of flight lessons in, was very excited, and then got a phone call from my girlfriend at the time. It woke me up on September 11th at 8:30 Central Time, asking me how big a 767 was, and that pretty much rocked the aviation world, as we all know. And so from there on, I still, flight training was suspended at our school for about 2 months, because the U.S. and the FAA created enhanced Class Bs, where the Class B airspace at the time went from the surface up to its ceiling. There wasn't the traditional wedding cake layers like it was, and our airport happened to be like 2 miles inside of the enhanced Class B, which means no flight training could happen. So we were shut down for a couple of months, and fast forward through history, got up through my commercial single engine land, and graduated. And my senior year, my advisor went and told me, "Hey, why don't you look at this aircraft dispatch class? Like, it's one more class. You get another minor. Your parents will be happy, and it gives you a backup plan." And I'm like, "What's aircraft dispatching? What is that?" Because it's something that I didn't even know about. But I'm like, okay, fine, I'll take it. Went through and took the class. Class was taught by 2 dispatchers from United, so taught by real world dispatchers who are living the profession. Got the time in the class, got to visit one of our teachers when he was on a shift at the NOC back in Elk Grove, where it was at the time. So went into the knock, got some time, really understood what a dispatch, profession was from the operations center. And so I was still doing flying. I was getting kind of frustrated with it. And I had the great idea as I was about 22, it was like 22 and a half, to say, hey, if I don't get anything going by the age of 23, I'm going to start applying for dispatch jobs, get my foot in the door at a regional airline, and then I will officially, go ahead and get my foot in the door, work on my build some multi time, and switch into the flight deck from there. Well, that didn't happen because I only spent 6 months, or I got hired at a regional, and the next day when I got off my first day my shift, I had to go to the Memphis FSDO to pick up my dispatch certificate, because all I had was a piece of paper that it said I completed all the steps to become an aircraft dispatcher except letter A, which was age, because I wasn't 23. And to be a dispatcher, like to be an ATP, you have to be 23. So I get off my first shift and I go over to the FSDO to get my temporary airman certificate. So 6 months later, I get hired by Acme Compass. And from there on, the dream of going to the flight deck kind of faded and withered because I started making too much money as a dispatcher. Then wife happened, kids happened, and that's where we are today.
I like the part that you said there about too much money happened. That's pretty rare that early in our career.
It is. It is a great thing, but it just goes and shows how poor first officers were being paid at regional airlines at the time. I mean, I was making double the salary as a new dispatcher at a major airline than I would be as a first officer at a regional.
Yeah, where I was, I won't say it, I shy away from saying it, but I was getting paid $17 an hour, and with pay guarantee, your first year salary was, I think, $23,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made $10,000 more than that a year just as a CFI.
Right.
Which is insane.
It is, but you were the glamorous airline pilot. You were going through and checking the dues to the dreams of hopefully getting picked up by a major, but there was 10 years of stagnation, and we're now finally starting to see the pilot pipeline moving now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of my best friends actually just got picked up at, we'll call it Big Blue Airlines, and he's going to be on the 75, 76 straight to that, but he's been at the regional subsidiary for over 10 years. And he only upgraded less than 1 year ago, spent 7 months in the left seat, and then straight on to Big Blue. So definitely congrats to him. But I think a lot of people fall into that camp and kind of align with that story.
Yeah, absolutely. There's guys that I went to college with that are now, or that have, got picked up by the majors a year or two ago. And here I am at the majors now, top of scale, and 12 years of experience with the major airlines. So it's definitely, I'm not, there's times where I'm saddened. Like today at work, I was walking around and I had to show a pilot where his simulator building was, because our campus is rather large. He didn't remember which sim building he was in, and I was walking with him, and he was going to the box, and just being like, ugh, I can't believe I have to go to the box, and just really go in there and have to do all of this. I'm like, oh, I'm sure the simulator will be fine. It's not like anything's gonna break, said it jokingly, and it's kind of like my back in my head. I was like, man, I really wish I was going to go into the box right now, because that's what I really wanted to do. But I'm okay with where I am at. I'm happy with my job, which we'll talk more, I'm sure, about why it's a little bit better.
So how's that fitting into your personal life then, not having to be on the road?
Well, it's the good thing about being a dispatcher is that you're home every night. I miss the opportunity to say that I fly jets, or would I still love to go get a type rating in something? Absolutely, I would. But I think I want to do that, if I do it at all, is after the kids are out of the house, because it is so nice, it is so convenient to be gone just for 10 to 12 hours a day, and then be back home and spend time with the family and watch the kids grow up, be active in their lives, growing up, and things like that. It's just really important for them to do that. So I'm really happy and really excited for that part, to watch my kids and family grow up without having to go away for 3 or 4 or 5, sometimes 8-day trips that pilots go out on, and then they come home for 2 or 3 days, and then boom, dad's gone again. So I'm very happy that it turned out that way. It's still shift work, and honestly, I probably work equally to what some of the senior captain friends at my airline do in terms of time. We have a lot of time off, which is also a big help as well.
It's a great balancing act of aviation. And I'll tell you what, the other big balancing act too, for those of us that, did fly or intended to, and then ended up, kind of doing something else, is still getting to fly. And what about you? I mean, you still fly, right?
I do. I took about an 11-year hiatus of flying, maybe a 10-year hiatus of flying. Just, finances weren't there to, support an aviation habit, because the thing that makes airplanes fly is money. It's not lift or thrust or anything like that. It's cash, and I just didn't have enough cash at the time. And so about 2.5-3 years ago, I bought a share in a 1963 Beechcraft Musketeer, which is kind of like the early brother of a Sundowner. So something that kind of looks, it's a low wing airplane, 4-seater, common Beechcraft, very stable aircraft, very solid. The airplane is a great airplane to fly. It's absolutely wonderful. I've taken it trips. I've taken it Sun and Fun. I've taken it up to Oshkosh. I do actual cross-country trips with the airplane. There's one time where the Acme flights were full to the destination where we were going to go, and the weather was going to be gorgeous all weekend. So I flew the family up to DC, and we got there. We got up there probably like 3 or 4 hours before the last Acme flight would have gotten us there. And it was just a quick decision my wife and I made. All right, come on, you weigh the bags. I'm gonna take the SIFRA training, and then we're gonna go to the airport and go. And it's so nice to just go to your airplane, put your stuff in it, do the pre-flight, load everybody up, and go, opposed to sitting for a TSA, waiting for a flight. Flying standby is that, are we really going to get on this flight or not? Or what are we going to do if we don't get on this flight? Could we fly to somewhere else and then go? Just my wife and I are pretty much over the whole fly for free. I guess it takes 10 years of flying for free to do that to you. And we really like the freedom that a personal aircraft gives us.
And everybody's always searching for those flight benefits, but there's only one thing better than flight benefits, and that's having your own airplane.
That's absolutely correct.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what then, that of course begs the most important question of all, which is, how does a Part 91 pilot, who's also a professional airline dispatcher, dispatch his own flight?
It's It's complicated, and it's kind of funny you do that. But when I go flying, it's pretty much what I do, especially if I'm going on a trip somewhere. If I'm going to a different airport, if I'm going to go off and just go fly airplane in a local area, or just go up to go flying because I just want to go flying, that's just a simple call of the weather and go. Check the weather, check the TAF, check the turbulence, check the NOTAMs, go fly. That's something easy. But if I'm doing I'll explain my process for the trip way I have coming up in July to Oshkosh. About whenever I'm bored at work or just want to play around, I open up ForeFlight and I start doing my flight planning there. So for me, flight planning starts that big, where are we going to stop? How are we going to plan our trip? I do all that via ForeFlight. I pretty much start with an origin and a destination and get the direct route. And then I look for airports in our stage lengths that where we want to go. It really starts with that. So start there. And first, let me kind of explain what a dispatcher does to your audience in case they don't know. What a dispatcher does is we do all the pre-flight planning for our flights, for Acme's flights. So we are separated down into regions. So there will be a desk that works, Chicago to the Dakotas. And they'll work all flights, maybe like to Minneapolis, to Fargo, to Grand Forks, and all that. They'll work those flights, and only those flights, and their world is just the upper Midwest. We'll have desks that work the Transcons, that work the San Franciscos to the New Yorks and the Seattles. Their whole world that they care about weather-wise is the continental United States. And then we'll break it out internationally. We have different desks that work flights to Europe, and their world that they care about is the North Atlantic fleet and weather. And then with same thing with the Pacific and South America and over to Africa and down to, the Pacific kind of lumps in our Australia in our office as well. So a dispatcher will work domestically about 35 to 40 flights in a 10-hour shift. Internationally, there'll be anywhere between 10 and 25 flights, depending, 25 flights if they're the Caribbean flights, which is basically kind of like domestic, but you have to know a little bit more rules. So when you go flying, the next time you fly on an airliner, you're going to notice the pilots get this big long thing of paper, and you get to either hand it to them or you'll see them folding it up. But that's the dispatcher release, and the dispatcher release has to have certain things on it. But by minimum, the dispatcher release has to have the aircraft flight number, the N number of the aircraft, the departure airport, any intermediate stops, destination airports, alternates, the type of operation, IFR or VFR, a minimum fuel supply, and for each, and all of that has to be on there and that's what we give the pilots. We basically do all the pre-flight planning for the pilots. Pilots show up at the gate, take a look at our work. If they agree with it, they sign the release, leave it at the gate, and they take off and they go flying to our destination. So our pre-flight planning is, we tell them what route of flight they're going, how much fuel it's going to take to get there, what's the weather going to be like en route at your origin, en route and at your destination, and what other notices to airmen, what's missing or broke at the airports where you're going to fly, what might be broken on the aircraft. We do all of that first, and it passes through our eyes, and then we give it off to the pilots to go and execute the mission. Now, we don't stop there when they block out. We continually follow and update the pilots as they continue to go and fly the trip. We connected to them via voice communications over radio or SATCOM, or we're connected to the pilots via ACARS, which is basically text messaging back and forth to the cockpit. So that's what a dispatcher does. So in my process of going and doing this whole pre-flight planning is I look at a flight and I pick out where we're going to stop first. And I do that 10 to 14 days in advance. I get a good plan of where we're going to go, what route we're going to fly, and what airports we're going to stop at. Using ForeFlight, reading the comments on FBOs, looking at fuel prices. If there's an airport with a restaurant on the way, I definitely would go out of the way to stop and get food at the same time and then continue on our trip. There's that. Then we get a little bit further out is a little bit closer, about 5 days closer. You get good model data off the internet, so you can kind of see what the clouds are going to be like, and you can kind of start to see if your mission and your timing is going to need to be altered. But really, about 3 days out is when I really start going into the weather, and I use the GFS Mav Moss graphics off of the weather NOAA.gov site, and this is very highly accurate usage of ceilings and visibility and thunderstorms and all of that stuff that you can see and really hone in the timing, and if your timing that you had planned is going to work for your particular trip.
Is that the same GFS that replaced the area forecast?
No, that's the GFA that replaced the area forecast.
Oh, okay, the GFA. Okay, so it's GFS. This is different.
Yeah, the GFS is one of the computer models, but in the GFA, I think only goes out. I think the GFA doesn't go out as long. I think that only goes out 18 to 24 hours, somewhere in there. This goes out a rolling 36-hour period. No, it's more than that. It's a rolling 3-day period that it goes out, and it gives you graphically what the ceilings are going to look like, and all that. And I'll give Brandon a link to that for the show notes, because it's a great tool for your long range, or you're starting your planning, 3 days out before you do your trip there. And then for there, once I got everything teed up, and right before I'm going to go, I go to ForeFlight, and I pack the flight and send it to my flights, and then I go and read through the ForeFlight briefing that happens. And that ForeFlight briefing that it produces, not to be a commercial for ForeFlight, I just find it's a great product, is almost exactly like what the dispatch release would be. I mean, it gives it to you. It graphically gives you weather. It gives you you can get your nav log from it. It's pretty much exactly what a dispatch release is like. Now, being a dad with some young kids, or even just being a guy that's flying long legs and long sectors, we have in the twin engine international world, we have ETOPS, extended twin operations, where we have to name alternates along our way. So the flight alternates along the way, so that in case an engine would fail, there's a listed alternate for the plane to go for with an emergency. Now, on a single engine airplane, I don't need that, but I say what I need is EBOPS. That would be extended bathroom operations. And this is when you look for alternate airports in between your two planned legs, somewhere maybe halfway in between, that you still research and you look at an airport in case you have to stop short, in case you have to land, in case the little one behind you says, "Daddy, I need to go to the bathroom," and no, I can't hold it. You're not there blind. You almost pre-plan your diversion, and if you don't need it, that's just information that you had, because if you really need it, you're going to want that information. So that's pretty much all I do, and what I do when I take my Part 91 pleasure flight and really cram it in there like I was actually releasing something with, for work.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, when I do a flight Part 91, really it's the same thing, whether I'm going to fly the Meridian or I'm just going to fly like a 172 or something. I think a great flight begins with really good planning. And that's when everyone's attention goes away and the eye rolling starts. And, I sound like I'm about to sit here and make you fill out one of those CFI nightmare nav logs that take 5 hours just to, fly 50 miles for your cross country like we did in training. But now that we have the technology, doing a very, very, very thorough pre-flight briefing and dispatch process, including the weight and balance and all of the time, speed, distance calculations and so forth with the current winds that are interpolated properly plugged in, can literally be done in less than 1 minute, right?
Yeah, doing your whole planning and all that. I'd put it maybe 5 minutes. I mean, because you actually have to read things. But, the more you plan, and the more you plan on your trip, the less surprises you're going to have, and the more enjoyable you're going to have just to fly your trip.
Of course. And, the best part is, too, you can actually print that stuff out or save it to PDF or however you want to do it. But you can end up, departing in your Cessna 172 with a very, several page long, professionally made full dispatch release that includes weight and balance and everything. And if you need to change something, like you need to shift the bags or you need to, somebody decides not to go or you decide to take something else, you just change one number in the algorithm and it just fixes all of it down the road, which is just an incredible technology that is actually pretty recent. But, one question I always had was, we're talking about ForeFlight here, you and I, and as we talked about before we started recording, I mean, I don't know how anybody could really be flying at this day and age without ForeFlight or at least something like it. But what kind of software and how does it compare actually with the software that you use at Acme to do this professionally?
It's pretty much, I'm not going to say it's the same because it's not. The flight planning software we use at Acme is very robust, incredibly accurate. We can flight plan a 777 with our cargo and our cargo numbers that we have, our passenger count that we have, and we can send it on a 14-hour flight across an ocean and land somewhere. And we're going to land at the time that we said 16 hours ago when we hit the compute button. We're going to land within a minute or two on either side of that. And we're going to land, a couple of 100 pounds, because in airline world, fuel is measured in pounds, not gallons. A couple of 100 pounds of what we said we were going to be at. And the pilots are going to get their step climb messages at this exact same time. I mean, it's a very accurate, robust piece of software that continues to evolve. And, ForeFlight is exactly the same thing. I mean, the computing time, the computing engines, exactly the same way. And it doesn't matter if you're planning a single engine airplane or if you're planning a, multi-engine airliner. You want accuracy, you want accurate numbers, and the ForeFlight engine, which I think is backed by Jeppesen now, which is a primo is flight planning company. They don't just make charts, but they also have a full flight planning software engine that some airlines use as well. So you're using the same tool and engine and quality of an engine that the airlines are when you're using an electronic flight bag like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you've got a great upstart company that's then got half of their stuff powered by Jeppesen and that's now owned by Boeing. So, yeah. So as we move through our flight, then we've done the dispatch process. We've actually departed on this thing. You touched on it a minute ago, but a professional air crew is able to communicate with their dispatcher that's handling their flight at all times throughout the flight, more or less. What can general aviation and Part 91 pilots do similarly, or is there anything we can do like that?
I think what you can do is you can let people know that you're going flying, and especially as the fleet is coming into ADS-B in and out flying, you let people know you're going flying. If I'm going out flying solo by myself and, I have the Flight Radar 24 on my kids' app. My kids like watching me go fly to see where I'm at. See if I'm coming over the house so they can run outside and see me. That's a great way to just have someone watching you as well. Obviously, file a flight plan. If you're IFR certified, file IFR flight plan. Be in touch with ATC. Always get flight following. Always get flight following. And I can just say it one more time from other controllers and controllers like yourself, do it. Just get flight following. Don't be scared of ATC. They're going to help you. And like I said, now with ADS-B and especially ADS-B in, you have real-time access to upcoming weather. You can check METARs ahead of you. You can see and plan ahead on these long legs. Is the weather changing in front of me? Because that's what a dispatcher is going to tell the pilot, and the pilots have functionality in the jets to download the ATIS and the data. You as a dispatcher, you have to sit in the jump seat of an airliner for 5 hours every year. If you're internationally qualified, that means you get to go and sit in the wide-body jets on transoceanic crossings. Now, I have flown to Dubai before. That was a 16-hour flight to Dubai. And you know what they did the first hour change after we departed Atlanta? They got the latest ATIS for Dubai. And they got the ATIS 16 times for Dubai every hour on the hour, constantly looking to see what the weather was like at the destination and if it was matching the forecast. With an EFB and a ADS-B in-equipped airplane, you totally get to do that. I did that on my way home from Oshkosh last year. I knew there was a cloud layer, and I knew I was approaching a cloud layer, and it was forecast to be VFR, but I was still monitoring to make sure, where is that cloud layer going to start? When do I need to start down to get below, get down to be below that cloud layer and stay below that cloud layer? Because currently my airplane is VFR only. And so it allows you to do that. If you're flying low enough, you still get cell signal. You have the internet. You can send text messages, and you can still get updates on it that way as well. So there's plenty of ways and tools that you have as a general aviation pilot to still be able to connect to the outside world and keep yourself updated and continuing to plan. As a good pilot, you're always ahead of your airplane. You always want to be ahead of the airplane and ahead of your situation. So in case something happens, you know where you are.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, there are so many different ways now with ADS-B or Sirius XM or just a straight up cell signal that you can keep yourself in the connected world and just continually monitor your progress, continually check the ATIS. And then, for airports that are equipped with D-ATIS, in ForeFlight, you can even pick up not just the METAR, but the actual ATIS for the airport.
Yeah, it comes with the Performance Plus, and finally, we've had digital ATIS at work for years, and we've been able to pick it up in the office. But you have to go to a website, and then you have to do that, and then you have to type in the code. Lately, if I needed to catch an ATIS, I just pull out my iPhone, open up ForeFlight, search for it, and get the ATIS that way because it's quicker than doing it. And just the same, like if I need to pull up an approach plate or something real quick for a question that we have, I usually pull out my iPad or my phone because it's quicker than going and getting the JEP charts off of the Acme JEP site. It's easier to get the JEP chart off my iPad through ForeFlight.
All right, so before we go then, I'm hoping maybe you can enlighten us. What can general aviation pilots sort of take away from the professional dispatching world that we can take with us as we fly Part 91 again?
Plan. Take in mind the fact that every single airliner has someone that has spent 5 to 10 minutes for domestically and almost 20 or 30 minutes, almost to an hour internationally, planning those flights and really preparing stuff. Take the time, think about everything that can happen on your flight, and then have a plan. Basically, mentally fly your flight as you're planning for it and try to figure out what are your risks and try to find out a way to mitigate them. It's things like that. Like I said earlier, the more you plan, the less surprises you're going to have.
Absolutely. Surprises are probably one of the worst things. That startle effect is guilty of making people do all kinds of things they wish they hadn't when they were thinking rationally, and anything you can do to keep yourself from getting surprised, probably a good idea.
Absolutely.
And that was such a good time talking with Mike. So what about you? How do you dispatch your Part 91 flight? Go over to podcastingonaplane.com and send me an email. Let me know how you do it. And let's give an extra special thank to Dispatcher Mike for making this interview happen, even though we're 3 hours apart and both in houses that are full of sleeping children.
I'm in my closet.
Me too, man. Me too. Before we go, we have a couple new patrons I want to give credit to. Let's all welcome Nicholas Gray and Eric Chadwick. If you're interested in supporting the show too, head over to podcastingonaplane.com and click on Support the Show. You can choose to make a one-time donation via PayPal, or if you're a super listener, you might be interested in becoming a recurring supporter on Patreon. If you do, you'll get some extra content that doesn't make it to the regular show for one reason or another. Just going to let that hang there for a minute. If you want to set up an instructional or mentoring session, head over to podcastingonaplane.com/contact and we'll set it up. Or if you just want to shoot me an email, my email address, of course, is brandon@podcastingonaplane.com. Well, that's all for now. Thanks again for listening. Your frequency change is approved until next time, and report back on this frequency for the next episode. Good day.
I'm Dispatcher Mike from the Flying Life Podcast. The Podcasting on the Plane podcast is presented for entertainment purposes only. Brandon's comments and those of his guests, the website's content, and the social media, etc., are not part of his official responsibility as a controller or as an FAA employee. The views and opinions you hear on the podcast are his and those of his guests, and not necessarily that of the FAA. There is no nexus between podcasting on a plane and the FAA. Also, while he's a CFI, he's not acting as your CFI, nor is he your mechanic, your doctor, your shrink, or your spouse. This podcast is presented for entertainment, camaraderie, and fun, but in no way, shape, or form professional advice or legal counsel. If you're in need of professional advice, get some from somewhere more appropriate than a podcast, no matter how good this one may be. Are you still there? Yeah, I'm here.